All right, guys, we are here today with Mike Nuss out of Portland, Oregon. And I'm super excited for this show because in the little pre-show formalities, you were telling us about a real estate strategy that I've honestly never heard of before, like at all. Like I've never even heard it talked about in another show. Maybe I'm just out of the loop these days or what. So we're going to be diving into that here shortly. But Mike, to start off, for people who've never heard about you before, give us a little bit of a rundown about what exactly your business looks like right now and what you kind of specialize in.
Yeah. So quickly, I've been in real estate since high school. So I got into real estate immediately through real estate appraisal. I've got a real estate background or a real estate appraisal background. And so I kind of use that I leverage that into my real estate investing strategy. So I love acquisition. I'm a deal junkie. I understand highest and best use better than most people because of the appraisal background and zoning code. And so then I leverage my skills as a real estate appraiser to then create a little bit more equity than most people would through the development play. And then I absolutely love economics. I learned a hard lesson in economics in 2008, 2009. I learned a hard lesson as an appraiser about businesses and starting businesses and pipelines of clients. And that's what got me on the economic road in the investing world. And I really love finance. And so you combine highest and best use with the development, with the finance brain, understanding how tenants think, property managers think, realtors think, sellers think, which again is just leveraging an appraisal skill set, which is we all have our own perception, but understanding everybody else's perspective and how that then creates their decision-making process in a transaction is how you establish market value for something. And so then if you can take that same skill set and then leverage that into owning a business and acquiring real estate and selling real estate, developing real estate, renting real estate, finance discussions, partnership discussions, it kind of all just blends together. And so that's kind of my special sauce. So where I'm at today, we got a decent sized rental portfolio, property management company that manages all that in-house. We do have some clients. I went the route of building a client side of the property management company, which became a big distraction. So we sold that off. Trying to rebuild that in a better route now. I have a brokerage. The brokerage is more investors that have licenses. So it's more of just coaching. It's fun, collaborative, a coaching, like a weekly coaching call. We don't actually offer services. But that's fun to just talk shop and, keep expenses in house and collaboration going. And then I'm developing a large condo pipeline. So on the development side, middle housing, it's a big thing in the Northwest, Minnesota. So Portland, Oregon's a big leader in it. Minnesota's a leader in it. Obviously Seattle, then cities like Austin, where we're taking single family zones, building ADUs, duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, and cottage clusters. And then that's not enough scale to build to rent model, but it's enough scale for a good build to sell model. So that's kind of what I do in the real. And then I flip houses as well. So the way I kind of look at it is, you need to make money to buy real estate, or you need to create equity to buy real estate. And so you either do that inside of real estate and then use the equity you create in real estate to buy real estate, or you create that equity through savings or income through another job, and then you use that to buy real estate. And so my chosen path is real estate to create equity. And then I use that to leverage and build a real estate portfolio. And the way I kind of define that is forced appreciation. Most of everything I buy is forced appreciation. Whether I sell it at the end or whether I rent it at the end comes down to what's the finance strategy, where the pools of the buckets of capital coming from, where's my portfolio, where are the other businesses at? And then it says, okay, well, is it going into our development pipeline? Is it going to go into the buy and hold pipeline? And so what I look at is our acquisitions company is like the tip of the spear. And then our portfolio, our balance sheet, and our service companies are like kind of that staff that keep it in the air. So yeah. I love acquisitions. That's kind of what I do. And then I just peel off as many of those as I can as rentals.
Man, that's awesome. You're like a true real estate professional. You have done everything, it sounds like. So I guess to manage all that, you have a lot going on. What does your team currently look like?
Dude, I'm so proud of my team. We at one point were up to 12 employees, and it was chaos. And it didn't work well. We're scaled down to 4. So we got 4 employees. 1 in acquisitions, 3 in property management. So the acquisitions is also our principal broker. So essentially I'm the coach in the brokerage. Our acquisitions manager is the principal broker. And so that kind of handles itself part-time, but acquisition guy manages acquisitions. My integrator, he does project management and then kind of integrates all the other companies. And then property management, I've got a portfolio manager, a maintenance guy, and we're hiring an assistant right now. So pretty lean team at this point, which has helped us to kind of get back in a better cash flow state, more profitable, and ready to start kicking some more butt.
Right. So on that acquisition side of things, I just want to understand, like, what does that look like? I mean, how is that acquisition manager for you? What is the pipeline? How are they developing that pipeline? Where do those leads come from?
Yeah. So I look at it, the best analogy I like is a bicycle wheel with all the spokes, right? So you need to have a strategy for every spoke, and the market conditions, as that wheel goes around, market conditions change, and some of the spokes become sturdier, some of them become weaker, and some of them you pull them out, some of them you add into. And so as your deal volume changes, you just review where is that deal volume coming from, and then you double down and you kind of play it like, and I look at work-life balance like this, is where it's like a guitar and it has different strings, and some of them you strum, some of them you don't, some of them you strum harder and longer, and some of them you don't. And so you create this ecosystem of different leads coming in from different ways. And then the beauty of like duration, I've been in this for 27 years now, and the development side for 12. And so every year we get a couple of repeat sellers. Every year we get a couple of repeat pocket listings from agents we work with. Every year we get a couple more like new people getting in that'll give us an overflow deal. And so the duration gives you this baseline level of deals you're going to do, and then you do your marketing. We've got a cold caller campaign, we've got a direct mail campaign, we do drive for dollars. We kind of have our fishing net version and our spear gun version. And we just put all those to use all at the same time. And then what my job is to manage all that, is to raise capital, do all the financing side, and then match the buckets of capital to the different types of projects. And in like, for me, rental portfolio is really boring. I like collecting keys. I love the name of your podcast because the collection part's awesome. The owning them part sucks. And so I always want to do deal volume. So like the thought process, Brandon Turner had this tweet the other day. He's like, here's what you do as flipping. Everyone does the same thing and the same color. That's so fucking boring. Pardon my French. I like different asset classes. I like different properties in different locations. So for me, I like to be physically close. So 2 to 3 mile square radius, lots of different types of neighborhoods, different price ranges, different property types. And it kind of satisfies the deal junkie in me, satisfies the deal volume of now we need to create equity to pay all the staff and then to buy real estate with. But what I really like about it is now you have the ability to raise different types of capital, different buckets of capital. And when you have that down, and so you think of it as seeds, right? So you're planting seeds in the different asset classes. You're planting seeds in different partnerships. Well, the capital is like the water that you need to water those seeds. And so the different types of water you have, whether it's got chicken manure in it or cow manure or whatever, organic stuff, then that water waters those different types of seeds of properties and partnerships. And so I kind of look at it as like this chessboard of how can I get all those pieces on the chessboard and then move them around based on my partnerships goals and what's flowing. Yeah.
I just love the fact that you're from Portland and you described your money raising as how it needs to be organic. I mean,
I didn't like that. I did like that.
Wow.
So, no, that's awesome though, man. So I guess like with all that being said, you said you have a little portfolio. Like, what does your portfolio look like overall? I'm assuming you have a wide range of asset classes in there.
Yeah, it's mostly small multifamily or some single family land banks. That's my skill set the most. Is I grew up in residential. I love residential. It's easy to manage for me. It just fits our asset class. So, 2 to 10 unit properties with a couple single families sprinkled in. I dabbled, and I prefer historic homes too. That's my thing. When I was an appraiser, I loved to appraise historic homes. I love, the nice thing about old homes is they're built way too big and they have these bad floor plans, and you can take these things and, a 1,200 square foot 1 bedroom and turn it into a grade 3-2. So you can create lots of value. There's, tax incentives with that. And then with it in Portland specifically, the historic neighborhoods are the best neighborhoods. They get the best rent. They're the sexiest. They have the most value, the lowest cap rates. And so you get the best value or the equity creation for every dollar you put in. And then I love modern construction. So I like to mix those two of remodeling old homes with kind of a modern flair to it, and then building modern construction around it.
Yeah.
I don't know if I answered your question.
When you talk about single family land banks, just so I understand, is that because those are spots where you might drop an ADU and you're just holding on to it until that opportunity presents itself? Or what do you mean by that?
Yeah, more scale than an ADU. And that's the beautiful thing in Portland. Like, you make this big change to the zoning code. Well, now everybody's land has the ability to do that. So it's like, oh, my land's worth more. They change the zoning. Yeah. And so is your neighbor and their neighbor and their neighbor and their neighbor. So in more bigger scale. So ideally commercial zone, something where you've got a single family home. You can buy it at a point and the debt load can be managed by the one home that's on it, but you can do bigger scale down the road, ideally 12 units or more. So like, I've got a half an acre of good commercial zone in not the best neighborhood of Portland, 2 properties next to each other. Both of them's a duplex, but we can build 60 units of affordable housing there. And our basis is at a point where it cash flows now. There's a lot of equity. And our base is also at a point where now that basis works for a low income housing development. It's a lot of brain damage. I don't want to go down that road now, but 10, 15 years from now, I'm sure I'll have a development partner that knows that inside now. I love the thought of providing affordable housing, and we have some of it, but I don't want to go through that process. So it's a bank now, and then hopefully we cash in later down the road.
Yeah. Awesome.
That's what I'm going to start calling some of our portfolios, a land bank that we're not sure what to do with, because like some of it you do hold on to because you're like, we're starting to see that it's bleeding over to Eastern Washington, like the Seattle policy and the state policy that's getting put out there where, now you can do ADUs on properties within the city. There's they've removed density requirements and stuff like that. So there are some properties that, in 3 to 5 years might be worth a hell of a lot more than they are now. We're just kind of waiting for the codes and the laws to catch up.
Yeah. And so in that aspect, knowing that those codes are coming in, and I just mentioned what zoning changed for everyone, so everyone's land value went up. That isn't really the case. There's specific pieces of property that you want to look for. So corner lots, because they've got dual frontage, alleys where now you have dual frontage, and then you have reduced setbacks. And so like the highest and best use, I mentioned that a lot of people don't understand. So it's legally permissible. We get that. Zoning code says you can do this. Great. Well, is it physically possible? Okay, now it's physically possible. Is it financially feasible? And typically everything gets killed before you get to the financially feasible. So if you're a developer and you have that development eye and I want corner lots. I want an existing residence off to the side. I want an alley location. And specifically for now, ADUs, middle housing in Portland, we're so dense, we had to remove parking. The only way to develop that type of housing is to remove parking. So then I need to be close to parks because we're doing small homes with no yards. I need to be close to public transportation. I need to be close to walkable amenities. And so like we just bought 15 of those projects over the past 3 years and are now exiting them in condos. So now we have all this market research of where do you get the best value for your buck as far as developing these types of things. And so now take that mindset into a market like yours, and you create a custom map. So now we're spear gun fishing for those types of properties. You create a custom map of these are all the best development properties based on this single family zoning, and then using a new code, then overlay that with equity. Boom, there's your seller finance list. Go get all the seller financing you can on those lots, land bank them, and then develop them when appropriate down the road.
Yeah, that's interesting. So I guess like with all that being said, everything gets sort of cut off at the affordability standpoint where it makes financial sense. Like that's 100% the case out here. I know Portland has a higher average price point in homes versus here, but like a lot of the rest of the country is even significantly cheaper than the Northwest, right? So is like your strategy right now, like, are you able to do any of these developments, or are you literally just treating it as like a bank and just hoping that eventually like the affordability of houses with the cost to construct actually does make sense in the future? Because like theoretically it could never come together.
Yeah, because construction costs aren't going down, right?
Yeah, I don't think they will. Like, why would they?
No. No, and right now is the worst time to develop a build for rent because you've got a saturation of competition, financing, so all those reasons. I've built one fourplex, and it was it's a 5 unit property, had an existing home off to the side. It made sense, but it was also a 1031. There was equity rolled into it. So, are you just buying dirt, building, and renting? Not unless you have a really good deal structure and economies of scale to make that happen. Now with like the condo development project, every project's within a close proximity to each other. And so in 52 total units and 12 to 15 properties, the idea as these exit is, can we hold one? Can we hold two? Like, how does that work? And that's project specific. But you have to the only reason we can do that is with scale. So it's not a build for rent model by any means. But it's also it goes into the equity. You have to have equity cash flow, sustainable cash flow. We can all do a seller finance deal. We can do margin on Airbnb. We can do margin on a lease option. We can create cash flow, but to have sustainable cash flow, you need to have equity. So, okay, do one project, create equity, you have no cash flow, roll that into another project, double the equity. Now you have cash flow. Roll that into another project and you have triple the equity. You have cash flow, you have a balance sheet, you have a track record, and now you have a resume to then go maximize and scale that.
Yeah. That makes sense. So let me ask you this then, because we're in the same situation in our market. Like the build to rent just does not make sense, but the build to sell might. When you talk about build to sell, say it's a quadplex or whatever is a common thing over there, is there a specific like profit you're looking to exit that okay, we can do this deal as a build to sell?
Yeah. Typically from a builder standpoint, 30% gross margin will get you a 20% net margin, and that's what you want to go off of. Gotcha. And to give background, I don't know if you guys want to get into it's not collecting keys at all, but I bought a bunch of this land in 2021. Okay. And this was brand new code, and then the code didn't come out in time, and then the code wasn't what you expect, and then you're buying stuff with the plan to design stuff later, and then the code changes and you redesign, and then the market crashes and then the financing changes, and so it's this just nightmare of cycle you're trying to get through to get stuff done. And so like our performas, and you just have to start redoing your performas, and it's like, okay, we have so much equity, which project do we bring to life at a time? And at one point that was close to $5 million of profit on the performa that, got down to less than $2.5 million of profit that now it's coming back to, $3 million of projected profit. So, it's a freaking roller coaster of the world. And so you're extending your timelines, which makes it riskier, and it's hard to bank on something like that. So, I'm not a fan of developing rentals by any means. I prefer to buy stuff that you can put I'm a big fan of stabilize and then maximize. One of the lessons I learned early on was we try to maximize everything, and then it becomes this cash flow management beast and project management beast, and it's just stabilize it, maximize it later.
Right. Right.
So I like
and that makes sense. The way you're doing it with if you can get 20% net margin and then roll that into your next one, which would basically create 40% equity. And you find buyers or these turnkey, basically you're building turnkey rentals for people then, and you're finding buyers that are coming in and willing to pay. I'm assuming they're willing to buy at a pretty low cap rate then on like a fourplex or something like that.
Yeah. So what we do is we separate ownership and sell them as condos. Because they're not going to work for investors. And so we sell to owner occupants. Yeah.
Okay. That's what you're, okay. That makes more sense, because I mean, we do see here where we're at Spokane, where people will come in and pay $800,000-$900,000 for something that gross rents at, $6,000 because they want to park some money and they're willing to get a 3 or 4% return. But that's just not you don't want to build a business banking on that.
Correct. Yeah. And there are, and I flip duplexes. Like I'm flipping a duplex now that we're going to sell it for $900,000, and it brings in $5,000 in rent. But there's
people that like it.
Yeah. Well, it's an owner occupied style unit. And so you understand, and kind of going back to the portfolio holding, I love 2 to 4 unit properties because it's the world of residential financing. It's the world of residential valuation. So it's emotional. You get the owner occupied component. And so you try and buy 2 to 4 unit properties, which are residential financing, at a commercial per unit price.
Mm-hmm.
And then now when you're done with your renovation, either to rent it or to sell, you've got your residential per unit price because it's 2 to 4. So you create more equity, which then allows you to hold them. Or you create more equity, which makes them more profitable on the flipping side.
Yeah. Very interesting. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I like what you said though, when you're looking at these different sort of opportunities, some of the challenges you said before is like, it all comes down to having like the best deal structure. And I think that's something that probably gets so overlooked these days that it sounds like you're very proficient at is how do you, it's not like as black as white as like, here's the money and we do the thing and then we, get the money back plus profit. Mm-hmm. But you're talking about doing these equity, map overlays with like the good development areas and doing the seller financing, all those sort of things. And I mean, honestly, you'd probably agree to do real estate at any sort of high level right now. You have to have that knowledge base and that hustle to figure that out. Otherwise you're going to be just out to lunch, right? You're never going to have any good opportunities anymore. So,
yeah. So like creating equity to build a rental portfolio. So right now I'm creating equity just with my brain and my skill set. And then I'm using that and leveraging that to build up my rental portfolio now through other partnerships. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's deal structure is everything. And that's the beauty of like, an abundant mindset versus a fixed mindset, making the pie bigger and then just giving it to everyone versus just building more pies. I want to make the pie the bigger and collaborate with people. And that's deal structure, right? If you think of the finite mindset, it's just like, well, we're just going to make more pies. Well, you're just replicating the same finance structure over and over and over and over again. And you're not sharing that pie. You just have more for yourself. I prefer the other route, which then makes deal structure an absolute must.
Yeah, totally. No, that's super, super interesting. Cool. We already ripped through 22 minutes. That was awesome. Sharing all the stuff you have going on.
Stuff.
I want to make sure we have appropriate time to talk to the thing that I alluded to at the beginning, which is these ticks that you're talking about. And so you jumped on here, you started throwing out this term, and I sat here with no idea what you were talking about.
Are they related to the bed bug species? Those kind of ticks.
Which we're currently dealing with in one of our sections.
Dealing with like a son of a bitch.
Yeah. So when I asked you at the beginning, what you're most excited about right now, you mentioned that you've been doing these tick deals. And so what is that?
Yeah, it's just a tenant in common ownership, right? And so instead of creating a partnership, creating an LLC, that now we have a business together that has its own set of business records and its own set of tax returns. A tenants in common is we can share ownership just based on our percentage. And then the way I structure it is, well, I have my property management company do all the pay and collect every penny of income and pay every single expense. And so now my property management company creates a set of books for that one property that then just gets divided by your portion of interest of ownership. And so where it came for me was I'm a deal junkie. I love coaching. I've been coaching for a long period of time. And it's this vision of how do I want to become a coach? And I've done a lot of coaching. And I don't like getting people starting with newbies makes me want to shoot myself. I had this idea of really coaching operators, which I love. I love coaching operators. But then, well, that's not a great dollar per, coaching is just not good leverage. And I don't like group coaching because I don't think it's as valuable. What I found out was I know a lot of people that are wealthy and they own real estate or they own businesses. And I love to just talk finances and economics. Well, they all have things very few people are putting their portfolio and their assets to their best use. And what happened was talking to a good friend and his wife, who's a friend, and we're planning on doing some syndications and some multifamily stuff. And they were selling a property in Kansas City. They needed 1031 exchange. And I had a seller finance deal come across my plate in Portland. And it wasn't a sexy deal. It was good. It wasn't great. But I also negotiated it without ever seeing the property. So I knew it had expandability, but it wasn't something that's easy to tap into. So there's value creation, but that's down the road. It's not immediate. When we finally got it in escrow and then looked at it, it was like, oh, well, I can add a bedroom here. I can create the income, make it a little bit better. And so it's like, well, now, so at first it was, well, this is a deal I can just pass off to you, right? You're in a 1031. I don't like it. It uses a whole bunch of capital. This is really good for a 1031 buyer. So I'll just pass it off to you. But when we started evaluating it and then seeing the highest and best use and seeing how low some of that fruit was hanging and how easy it was to get that fruit. And now instead of creating like 100 grand of equity with 100 grand of capital, now we're creating 300 grand of equity with 100 grand of capital. Well, now it's too good to pass along. It's like, well, I can't just give this to you, but I'm also kind of like, I hate to back out on things like my word matters. So, well, let's do this. We're going to form a partnership. I don't know how we're going to do it. We're going to form a partnership. You're going to own some. I'm going to own some. Here's what I want out of it. It's a really good deal. I want you to bring my ownership to it. So you're going to pay for my ownership. We're going to figure out how to get that done. And I'm going to manage it with my property management company. So I'm using this to build my portfolio, to build my property management company. And I'm then leveraging, like I said, the staff of the spear to then create the equity that now builds the portfolio. And so what we did is we structured this 1031 where a 1031 they own it personally, but it can exchange into a tick. And so we just made the ownership and so now it's just smoke and mirrors. It's deal structure. Okay. So what structure we can only 1031 in so much capital based on what's required to close the deal, but it's also a forced appreciation play. You need some cash. So how do we structure a deal based on the amount of ownership split where they can use some of their exchange money, but not all their exchange money, to then bring money to the deal inside of their exchange, but then bring cash to the deal outside of their exchange to pay for my ownership, right? Because they can only bring in their ownership, but the deal structure is they need to bring in mine. And so what we do is we create a scenario where we create boot in the exchange. So they get cash, they get taxable cash. But in this scenario, the asset they're exchanging into is so much more valuable than the crap in the Midwest they're exchanging out of that it still qualifies for all their exchange. It's just the boot that they get, the cash is taxable. Well, again, it's a much bigger asset. And so with bonus depreciation, you cost seg it, you bonus depreciate it. Now you get rid of their tax liability. And now they have cash. And so then we can structure it so the cash gets lent to the tick to then do the forced depreciation. And then that loan can create the cash flow to offset the cash flow that they lost in the Midwest. So now they own an asset with me. That asset is in a really good debt position because of the equity that we exchanged in, and then the equity that we created, and then the hard funds we put in the loan portion of it. So there's cash flow, there's ownership, there's equity. We can refinance it easier. We've created a lot of equity. In this position, it's a property, it's a land bank. So it's a duplex off to the side. We can build 4 other units on the corner. So it's a great piece of developable property. And more importantly, they've replaced their cash flow. Now they don't have a property manager. They have a developer that is an owner that owns the property. So I'm tied to the bottom line. Obviously, I want to maximize everything from a value standpoint. I want to maximize everything from a cash flow standpoint. And since I'm a finance expert and now I'm a developer, I understand the condo conversions. There's so many different exit strategies we can put into play. We can split off a lot. We can syndicate the lot. We can build it ourselves. We can so they're ecstatic, right?
Yeah.
At the end of the day, they still have cash left over. They have ownership. They have their cash flow. They have more cash flow. They have more equity. They have more upside. And they have a partner that's going to do it all for them.
Yeah.
Wow.
Interesting.
That's a lot. I'm trying to consume all that.
Yeah. It's fun.
So on the tenants in common piece, to step back to that, like typically you'd see in this scenario like a JV agreement, or you guys would start like this LLC. The tenant in commons kind of skirts that. Is that still something like when you guys are recording title, like obviously you're both on title or both your LLCs are on title, however that works, as tenants in common, and your lawyer just drafts up some documents showing like, hey, Mike owns this percentage and he gets that via this person's cash. It's all just recorded document, same thing. Okay.
Yeah. And it's correct. And now you have 2 decision makers of every property, right? So instead of your portion of the LLC that determines control, now you actually have 2 different owners. And now, so that you have to be in alignment. There's the downside is if you're not in alignment and are you not making the same decision. So every deal structure has downside. Every deal structure has its complications that need to overcome. So there needs to be a level of trust, and this works because I've known these individuals for a period of time, and I've got a track record to trust me. So yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, sometimes that could be beneficial because you go into a deal and say you're like 70-30, you're 70, they're 30, but with an LLC, you always will vote what happens. But 30% for them might be just as life-changing as your 70% is to you, if not more, potentially. Right. So they might be more just as vested in the success of the operation of this business, but not have any power once they give that 30%. So in this,
exactly,
you have to both agree. It's like kind of being married somewhat.
Yeah, it is because because now it's an actual partner you have to agree with versus, well, it doesn't matter if I agree with them or not because they have all control. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
So for someone who's, just hearing this concept, what would be like the, I don't know, like the first look, like 5-second test to see if exploring something like this even makes sense? Like what is like the basic deal where you can be like, you see it immediately and you can be like, I think a tenant in common could be a good sort of strategy with this deal.
Yeah. So it's kind of new to me, so I can't say exactly, but what are the elements I wanted to do? So the elements I want, here's what I want, and here's what I want for my partner. And I want the right deal to make both those things happen. So I want ownership without paying for it. I want to have the professional property management contract of it. I want to have a forced appreciation play because I don't want to work without forcing appreciation. I want to have cash flow at the end of the day, and I want to have them replace the cash flow they lost.
Yeah.
And so that's how it becomes a win-win. They have the same cash flow to begin with. They have the upside of more cash flow, and then they improved their overall net worth just by purchasing that property because now they've forced appreciated and created more equity.
Yeah. So it's almost like using other people's money, right? Like raising money, but it allows them to roll 1031 funds in directly instead of having to pay taxes and have like a note or whatever else on it.
Yep. It's just a different form of water.
Yeah. Yeah. That's fascinating. So I guess would it make sense to do something like this if somebody wasn't doing a 1031 exchange, or would you be better off doing like an LLC or just having them?
Yeah, correct. So the 1031 is what drives the tick. Exactly. So ideally an LLC and now it's a voting, it's a much cleaner ownership structure. I don't want to speak into the tax portion of it yet because I haven't actually filed a tax return on this structure yet, and so I'm uneducated in that arena. But from a control standpoint, it's much simpler. It's better in my opinion. And so again, it's like, well, it's a bucket of capital forced to be in that bucket based on previous actions and the tax code. And so rather than just ignoring that capital, it's like, okay, we'll understand the parameters around that capital and then throw the seed in the ground that capital is meant for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's very cool. And then, so I guess on paper with this ownership, are you guys like straight 50-50 in this purchase, or did you basically structure it based off of terms that made sense for both of your guys' desires and they work into?
So this is probably a good thing for listeners. I mean, you've got operators or your listeners, so they get it, but you just talk about what you do and people get excited. And so now I've got 4 other partners that want to do this now. And so what I'm explaining is the deal is going to justify how much ownership I get. Right? Because the deal is going to justify how much equity we create and how much cash flow we create. And then the other piece of that is the amount of leverage. So if it's something like the new property is a cash out and we're getting bank debt with amortized payments and a high interest rate, we're going to need to have equity, which means we're going to need to bring more cash, which means it's going to be the more equity I have, the more outside cash that needs to be brought. So in that scenario, there's probably less cash flow. There's probably less equity creation. Well, shrinking my ownership portion makes sense to then make that structure work versus if it's a higher leverage deal with seller financing, we're creating a heck of a lot of cash flow and a heck of a lot of equity. Well, then now you need less cash resources, which is going to increase that internal rate of return on that purchase. So then I justify more ownership in that scenario. And so you just kind of run all the numbers to find that sweet spot of what makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, man, there's so many options, right? Like, and it's funny because you hear so many people structure things the traditional way. You get a private lender, they make a pref, you have an LPGP split that will have different what do they call them? Like the levels they have to reach where the GP gets paid
like
more.
waterfalls.
And, the waterfalls and that sort of stuff. And like it's what you're doing is, I guess, probably has the potential to be fundamentally the same, but it appears like it has a lot more flexibility since they are actually taking title of the property along with you. You have to, I mean, I'm assuming you don't have to register something like this with the SEC like you would with a syndication or anything else like that. It can be fully freeform. It's a business relationship.
Exactly.
Very
and
nice.
it's not even, because it's even ownership. There's no loan involved. There's no investment involved. It's they're just buying this property. So you avoid all of that. And the other thing is, what do owners want? They want passivity, but they also don't want to give up control. So that's where being an LP is like, well, you get one, but you don't get the other. In this scenario, you really have both.
Yeah. And then, so how does this work if it goes sideways, right? So the deal has problems and you guys have to do a capital call. Is that treated exactly the same where you guys are making capital calls equal to your % ownership?
Correct. Yep. Okay. Yeah, exactly. So essentially the acquisition's done. We've done the smoke and mirrors to acquire the property. Now it's performing ideally, right? Well, the loan's done. If that loan doesn't get us fully renovated and we don't have a performing asset and we need more capital, well, then what are our options? We can say, well, can we borrow more money from you? Do we do a capital call that then is going to be based on our percentage of ownership? Do we go and borrow more money from somewhere else? Do we sell the asset? So it's kind of that same type of scenario, but correct. It's going to be now because our deal is done. Now we're owners, right? Our deal to get into ownership's done. That didn't work. Now we have an ownership split that we need to get through.
Yeah. Interesting. Huh. Yeah. How did you learn about this? Like, did someone bring this to you, or is this just like your knowledge, like something that's always been on your radar and you just had the perfect opportunity to give it a shot?
Over time, another GoBundance friend of ours was selling some properties. I remember meeting him, going to his property and taking a look at his property. And the market had just crashed. The neighbor's property sold for 80 grand more than he was asking, those type of things. And he just was really hell bent on doing a 1031. I couldn't wrap my brain around it. I was like, why? You can just go get a loan. It's free and clear. Get a loan. And he was he was struggling getting a good 1031 vehicle to get into because he wanted to be passive. He wanted to be an LP. He wanted to be in a syndication. A lot of syndications don't take on 1031s because of the brain damage on their side. And so 1031 is always hard for sellers. We get that even on just the small level world. Well, what if you don't want a replacement property and now you want to do a different type of fund, but then now you got to find the fund that accepts that. And then the funds that do accept that typically have lower returns because they have to pay for the brain damage of allowing that. And so that was a seed that was planted in my brain in 2022. It's like, oh, there's a problem out here. Didn't really think about it. It just came about. So it's like, well, now, you have ticks and then this opportunity's here and someone's in a 1031. And here's where it really comes down to is the people that you meet in the network. There's this local 1031 exchange attorney, Toya Butler, is amazing. She's licensed in 7 states, just sold her business. But when she broke off, I think she was with First American, one of the big companies, started her company. We just supported the heck out of her. Came and spoke to our community, did some continuing education events, got her a whole bunch of business. She just loves to shoot the shit with me and we brainstorm and I love to call her up. I'm like, Toya, I got another one for you. Here's what I'm thinking. And she's okay, Mike, let's do this. And, she's a short little Irish lady, talks faster than I do. And she creates these ideas for me.
Nice.
So I tell her what I'm thinking, what's wrong with this? And she says, okay, well, we can't do that. But, if we did it this way, we can get the same goal done. And so you just sharpening swords where she likes me because I bring her a crazy idea, which then makes her think in a way that no one else has made her think. And she's like, and the beautiful thing was with this partnership, my friends they had already sold their property. They were already in an exchange and it was with Toya. And so, okay, let's get Toya on the phone. And she just walked us through it.
Awesome.
Yeah. That's a good, that's just a great example of having that people in your network that you can trust, that you personally are challenging, because she also probably likes doing challenging things because it's just because they're another tool she can offer more clients.
Just like we do, right? And I say this so often, it's probably what I'm quoted on the most. Your social capital is worth more than any other currency you can ever have. So
100%.
yeah. And this is a great example of that. So again, equity. I didn't do anything. I just had a brain and a system and an idea, and then I had the network around it to fill in the pieces.
And it came together. Yeah.
Mhm.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, very, very good stuff, Mike. You are, like I said at the beginning, a real estate pro. You are like all in the weeds, and
Yeah.
it's really fascinating to hear how these deals have come together for you. So we're going to start winding down here as we near the end of our show. So we ask the same 3 questions of everyone that comes on the show. And the first one, which is the group favorite, is what is your craziest real estate investing story? Since you've been in the game for a while and being out of Portland, I'm sure you have some good ones. Because the Northwest, we have come to find, has some unique characters and transaction situations that, believe it or not, don't exist in other parts of the country. We've learned this since we've expanded our business naturally. Yeah, like a lot of the weirdos, like it is very
It's
much
just a Northwest thing.
Like totally.
Yeah. There's so many
anyway, what's your
stories.
craziest
My business partner early on was on the cover of the paper because he was being stalked by a what do they call it now? It's what George is going to Dr. Phil for his video. Squatters. So squatter rights, right? So squatter house, squatter rights. Yeah. And it's crazy. He stalked him, went to court, had to get a restraining order against him. But he went through the whole, essentially stole his property from him, and then he had to take him to civil court to get it back. So all that type of stuff happens. I wasn't really involved with that. I was on the ancillary kind of laughing at him and giving him support as he went through all that garbage. But the craziest story for me, man, I bought this property where reverse mortgage scenario, and you get this, where an estranged aunt, so this is how the owner was explained to me, was estranged aunt. No one in the family liked her anymore. She burnt every bridge, and she had a reverse mortgage. She had a caretaker. She's a hoarder. So she had a lot of animals. She died in the house. The caretaker had access to the checkbook. Didn't tell anybody, just spent all the money in the checkbook. The nephew, who lived relatively close by and was the only person that was ever in touch with her, hadn't heard from her in a few weeks, went and checked on her, and he found her in the basement. Her animals were eating her. That was the worst. Yeah. And I went in 2, 3, 4 weeks after that. It hadn't been cleared out, but the body was gone. It was the worst house. It's still that smell today still haunts me.
I bet.
Yeah, I don't know if that's the best investing story. It's probably the gruesomest and grossest.
It seems standard. It seems on par for what we see in this side of the business.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
we've had.
That's why investors exist. Yeah, no homeowner's ever going to buy that.
So
I do my audio, my Wi-Fi cut out right as I didn't hear anything you just said.
Oh no,
you're good.
You're good. Max, fix that. It's our producer. But yeah, I mean, we've had our fair share of those too. I mean, we've had, it's just part of the game, unfortunately, especially when older people get involved. But yeah, I mean, at least, so what was your exit on that one? Did you wholesale that? Did you flip that? Did you buy it?
Yeah, that one is actually a wholesale, and that was early on in my career before I really had a whole lot of control of everything that I was doing. And so it was more of a partnership type thing, and a wholesale was the exit. Yeah, I was getting started.
There you
go. Nice.
Easy enough. Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Second question. What is the number one tip you have for a small-time investor looking to take their business to the next level? And the Wi-Fi was doing.
I cut out. It just my connection starts going bad at the end.
Just the right time.
Yeah.
No worries. Yeah. All right, we'll do that. We'll do that part over. I'll say it again. All right. Next question. What is the number one tip you would give to a small-time investor looking to take the business to the next level?
Talk to as many property sellers as you can. I absolutely love the boots in the streets model. For new investors, get your boots in the street, get in the neighborhood. I just moved into a neighborhood I wanted to move into. I love it. It's historic. Walking the dog. I know all the vacant properties. I know all the beaters. Now I'm creating a list of all the property owners. And so what am I going to do? I'm going to call them all. I live in your neighborhood. I love this neighborhood. I saw your property. It's vacant. Getting in touch with real-time property owners that you know have real-time problems, which are vacant properties and fixers and hoarder tenants and code violations. That's the key to success. So get the relationship started with the property owner and then expand your pie. Bring in partners. Like if you don't have all the resources, understand the value you're bringing to the table. If you don't have all the resources to get it done, don't think you deserve 50% of it. It may be an amazing deal, and sure, maybe you get 50% of it. But the one mistake I see a lot of newbies do is they really overvalue what they have. They overvalue the deal they have, and then they overvalue the resources that they're not bringing to the table, or undervalue the resources that other people are bringing to the table.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure. Sorry, I think we had another delay there again, but I heard you at the end there. Yeah, I mean, that's what we always sort of emphasize too, is building like kind of that lead and opportunity snowball, whether that's doing it manually, hitting the streets, running some marketing efforts, doing things like that, just really starting to find the, I would say, like abundance of opportunities that are out there, and then just learning to work them. That is, I mean, it's the basis for every kind of business, right? You have to have leads if you're going to have deals. Otherwise, you're kind of just wasting your time.
And align yourself with someone that you can trust that can help you evaluate those opportunities.
Definitely. Yeah. That's an underrated comment there too, especially when you're starting out. But, have people that listen to 5 Bigger Pockets episodes and they're pros. So they don't need anybody else.
Exactly.
I love the people that have started a podcast and a course after buying one property. That's my favorite.
All right. We're going to get through this. I cut out one more. Okay.
The last one.
Yep. All right, Mike, where can people find you? He does. All right, Mike, where can people find you, follow you, and reach out to you?
Yeah, I put a lot of content, like writing content on Facebook right now. So just Mike Nuss on Facebook. Instagram is at RareBirdMike. I do a lot of stuff on that and share with Facebook. I just started a new podcast with 3 other friends. It's really fun, Deal Junkies. Really similar to yours, where we like to deep dive on actual deals. We don't get into people's background as much as it is what's the fun talking shop, like what do you do in the background when you're just hanging out with your real estate friends. So, yeah.
Nice. Awesome.
I
love it. Right on, guys. Well, you should definitely go and give Mike a follow, and actually really enjoy the long form Facebook stuff you do. You ask some really provocative questions.
Thanks,
you actually start some really like good engagement on there too. And so very rarely do I see people that I think use Facebook in a way that I actually like, and you've cracked the code. So you guys go and give him a follow there. Check out his podcast. And I will also say you have a really solid like brand and website built out through your myrarebird.com and your brokerage. I see a lot of different sites and stuff people send me over, and yours one of the best ones. So props to you there too.
Man, thank you.
Yeah, for sure. But reach out to Mike here, you guys. Remember, people come on these shows because they want you to engage with them. If they didn't want to hear from you, then they would just stay in their lane and go and do their own thing. They wouldn't be doing the little podcast circuit. So, Mike, we really appreciate you coming on the show. And thanks for listening, everybody. And we'll talk to you guys next week.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate the opportunity.